A mother, German Shepherd, ran along the frozen road, her paws bleeding on the ice, her eyes wild with fear. Behind the wire fence, her puppy dangled helplessly, trapped, crying for breath as the river beneath cracked and groaned. And on that same road, a Navy SEAL drove through the storm, lost in silence, chasing ghosts only he could see. He thought his wars were over, but fate had other plans. When their paths crossed, it wasn't just a puppy that needed saving. It was his soul too. What happened next will make you believe that mercy still survives in the coldest of winters. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. The morning was a pale shade of gray over the vast plains of Wyoming, the kind of gray that swallowed light and sound alike. Snow covered everything: the road, the frozen fields, the bare skeletons of willow trees bending under the wind. The cold was sharp and merciless, the air so thin it seemed to cut through layers of fabric and skin. A lone SUV rolled slowly down the two-lane highway that hugged the edge of a half-frozen river. Inside sat Logan Parker, a 38-year-old Navy SEAL veteran, his broad shoulders wrapped in a faded green-gray jacket that still carried the faint scent of sea salt and gun oil. His short, dark brown hair was speckled with gray, and the light stubble along his jaw made him look perpetually tired. His eyes, blue-gray, steady but worn, stared ahead as though he were still navigating some battlefield invisible to the rest of the world. He had been back from deployment for 10 months, though the word home had lost its meaning somewhere along the way. The small town of Riverside Bend, where he was born, lay just 30 miles south, but he rarely went there. People looked at him with that mix of admiration and pity that made him feel more ghost than man. He spent most days driving the long open roads, seeking silence. Yet even silence wasn't empty enough to drown the memories that came without warning. The explosions, the brothers he couldn't save, the orders that haunted him more than any nightmare. Today's drive had no destination. It was just another attempt to outrun the noise inside his head. The radio was off. The only sound came from the steady hum of the engine and the low whistle of the wind curling through the cracks in the door. The steering wheel vibrated faintly beneath his gloves. Snow began to fall again, gently at first, like ash from a dying fire. As the road curved closer to the river, Logan slowed instinctively. He glanced toward the water, or what was left of it. Large plates of ice drifted under a thin layer of snow, and along the edge, reeds and dry grass poked through, brittle and brown. For a fleeting moment, he thought about how quiet death must be under that ice. Still, cold, final. Then something moved, a flash of color against the white. At first, he thought it was a deer, but it was smaller, faster. A German Shepherd, adult, black and tan, darting from the riverbank up onto the road. Logan's hands tightened on the wheel, his pulse leaping. The animal was running directly toward his vehicle, barking, sharp, desperate, cutting through the wind like an alarm. Whoa! Logan hit the brakes, tires crunching into the ice and snow. The SUV slid slightly before coming to a halt. The dog stopped just a few feet away, chest heaving, fur matted with frost. Its eyes locked on his, bright amber and filled with something more than fear, urgency. He rolled the window down halfway, and a gust of frigid air hit his face. "Easy, girl," he called softly. His voice came out hoarse, unused to gentleness. The German Shepherd barked again, one paw stomping the ground, tail rigid, as if commanding him to follow. She turned, sprinted a few paces toward the fence by the river, then stopped and looked back. Another bark, louder this time, almost pleading. "What the hell?" Logan muttered. He glanced around. The road was empty, the landscape silent, except for the wind whistling through the wire fence that ran along the riverbank. For a few seconds, he sat there, hands still on the wheel, torn between reason and instinct. He had seen that look before, in men trapped under fire, in civilians begging for help amid the smoke. He could ignore it, drive away, pretend it wasn't his problem. But something in his chest ached. That tiny flicker of instinct, the one the war hadn't killed, pushed him to move. He killed the engine. The world went silent, except for the distant river, groaning under its crust of ice. Logan shoved the door open, boots landing in the snow with a muffled crunch. The cold bit instantly through his jeans, but he didn't care. The German shepherd turned toward him, barking once, short, sharp, grateful, and then ran full speed toward the fence. Her paws kicked up snow as she went, muscles rippling beneath her thick coat. Logan followed, the air burning his lungs, each step sinking deep into the drifts beside the road. As he got closer to the fence, he could see the river beyond, frozen in parts, running dark and fast beneath the thin ice. And there, near the bottom of the slope, he finally saw what she had been trying to show him. Something small was struggling against the fence. He squinted, heart tightening. A puppy, barely old enough to stand on its own, was tangled in the wire mesh, half on one side and half on the other. Its hind leg was caught tightly between two strands, and every time it kicked, the metal dug deeper into its fur. The poor thing whimpered softly, its little body trembling from cold and fear. The mother barked frantically, pacing back and forth near the puppy, but unable to help. Her breaths came out as bursts of steam in the freezing air. Logan stopped at the top of the small slope, boots planted firmly in the snow, breath fogging around his face. His pulse raced in his ears. The whole scene looked unreal. Two lives trapped in the heart of nowhere, and somehow he had stumbled right into it. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. That sharp, focused energy that used to come to him in the middle of chaos. Only this time, there was no mission, no commander, just a mother dog begging for help and a puppy clinging to life. For a moment, he looked up at the gray sky, flakes swirling like ash. Why me? He thought. But the answer didn't matter. The instinct had already taken over. Logan adjusted his gloves, exhaled once through his nose, and started down the slope toward the fence. The German shepherd turned, barking wildly as if to urge him on, her eyes wide with hope and desperation. And then, as the snow swirled thicker around them, the wind howling off the frozen river, Logan reached the fence line. He stopped, breath heavy, scanning the tangle of wire and fur before him. The puppy let out a faint cry. The mother pressed her body close to the fence, whining low, her tail trembling. Logan's boots crunched softly as he took another step forward. His voice, quiet but certain, broke the frozen silence. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here." Then, without thinking twice, Logan opened the car door wider behind him, stepped fully into the snow, and walked toward the fence, while the mother dog ran ahead, straight to the wire at the river's edge, as if pleading for him to follow. The storm thickened over the plains of Wyoming, its wind howling like some restless spirit searching for a way home. The gray sky had deepened into a darker steel hue, and the first sharp flakes of snow began to twist through the air, sticking to the windshield of Logan Parker's SUV. The river beside the road was no longer quiet. Ice cracked beneath the weight of the storm, groaning as the current pushed below it. Logan stood by his vehicle, one gloved hand gripping the open door, his breath visible in the cold air. Just a few minutes ago, a German Shepherd mother had burst from the riverbank and stopped in the middle of the road, barking like her soul depended on it. He'd seen urgency before, in battlefields, in the eyes of soldiers calling for medics. But this was different. This was pure desperation. Now she was running back toward the river, her paws leaving quick, shallow prints in the snow. Her fur was coated with frost, tail stiff, ears back against her head. Every few strides she looked over her shoulder, barking at him as if pleading for him to follow. Logan hesitated for barely a second, his instincts at war with exhaustion. For months he'd been driving these empty roads, trying to outrun the ghosts of war. He had sworn to himself that he wouldn't get involved in anyone's fight ever again. Not human, not animal, not anything that could drag him back into the chaos of caring too much. But something about that dog's cry hit a nerve he couldn't turn away from. He slammed the car door shut, the sound lost in the wind, and started running. His boots broke through the crust of snow, crunching loudly as he followed the dog down the slope. The cold knifed through his jacket, the wind burning his face raw, but he barely felt it. All he could hear was that bark, desperate, rhythmic, guiding. The slope grew steeper near the edge of the river. Logan slowed just enough to keep his balance, squinting through the snow until he could finally see what she was running toward. Then his heart clenched. A tiny German Shepherd puppy, maybe 8 weeks old, was tangled halfway through a stretch of old wire fencing that ran along the riverbank. The wire had sagged and twisted from years of winter, leaning over the icy drop. The pup's hind legs kicked helplessly, its front paws clawing at the snow. Every small struggle only pulled it closer to the edge where the ground crumbled into the frozen water below. Its fur, black and tan like its mother's, was stiff with ice, and its whimpers were barely audible over the wind. "God," Logan muttered, breath fogging before his lips. The sight hit him like a punch. That small, fragile body clinging to life in the cold was too familiar, too much like the things he had tried to forget. The comrades he couldn't reach in time, the moments when a heartbeat slipped away just before rescue came. The mother dog barked again, frantic, pacing back and forth behind the fence, her claws scraping against the frozen ground. Her tail lashed the air, her chest rising and falling so fast it looked painful. Logan took a cautious step closer, hands raised slightly. "Easy, girl. I see him. I'll help." She paused, just long enough to meet his eyes, ears pricked forward, her breath heavy and white against the gray air. There was no mistrust there, only a plea for speed. Then she turned back toward the puppy and began pawing uselessly at the fence. The wind picked up, carrying flakes sideways now. Logan crouched, his boots sliding slightly on the slope, and looked closer at the fence. The puppy's back leg was caught between two strands of rusted wire, the metal biting deep into the fur. He could already see a faint trace of blood. Every kick only made it worse. He had no tools, no cutters, no gloves thick enough for this kind of cold. All he had was a knife, a battered multi-tool he'd carried through half a dozen deployments. It was enough. He drew it from his belt and knelt by the wire, careful not to scare the puppy further. "Hang on, little guy," he murmured. "You're tougher than you look." The puppy whimpered again, a weak sound that barely carried over the river's creaking ice. Its tiny chest heaved, breath quick and shallow. Logan reached out slowly, letting it sniff his hand before he touched the wire. The mother's barking slowed, turning into a low whine, as if she understood he was trying to help. The metal was so cold, it burned through his gloves. He hissed, pulling one hand back, then tried again, gripping the base of the twisted wire and pressing the knife blade against the knot. His muscles strained as he worked the steel back and forth. "Come on," he muttered under his breath, his heartbeat pounding against his ribs. Above them, the wind howled louder, and somewhere far off, a branch snapped like a gunshot. Logan's concentration broke for just a moment, long enough for his boot to slip. He caught himself against the fence, shoulder slamming into the metal. The puppy squealed in panic, and his pulse spiked. He steadied himself quickly, jaw tight. "It's all right. I got you." The sound of his own voice reminded him he wasn't in a war zone anymore. Just a man in the snow, saving a life that didn't know his name. A faint groan echoed through the air, not from the dog this time, but from the river. Logan looked down and saw the ice shifting, splitting slightly where the current ran strongest. A dark crack wound its way toward the bank. He felt the vibration through his knees. If the puppy slipped, even a few inches, it would fall straight onto that ice. And the ice wouldn't hold. Damn it. He pushed the knife harder, ignoring the pain in his fingers. The mother barked wildly now, jumping at the fence as though to help. The puppy's back legs jerked in panic, sending bits of snow and dirt tumbling down toward the river. Logan's lungs burned, his vision blurring slightly from the sting of the cold. He leaned closer, nearly pressing his cheek against the icy wire. His knife slipped once, slicing the edge of his glove, but he didn't stop. The thin layer of skin on his fingers tore, but still he kept sawing. And then, beneath the howl of the storm, he heard the faintest metallic ping. The wire began to give. He grabbed the nearest strand and twisted hard, widening the gap. The puppy slid halfway free, kicking, scraping, crying. Almost there. Logan breathed, voice trembling. The mother dog barked again, her tail stiff as a rod, her body pressing against the fence. The ground near the puppy began to crumble, small pieces of frozen earth falling into the dark water below. Logan's pulse thundered in his chest. The puppy's hind paw slipped again, and its tiny claws scrabbled at the snow. That was all it took. Training, fear, instinct. Everything hit him at once. Without thinking, he dropped the knife, braced his boots against the frozen ground, and lunged forward through the snow. Logan sprinted from the car, straight toward the fence, heart hammering, as he saw the puppy sliding inch by inch toward the edge. The wind screamed louder than before, tearing through the valley like a living thing. Snow spun violently across the riverbank, and the world had become a storm of white noise and panic. Logan's breath came in heavy bursts as he fought to keep his footing on the frozen ground. His hands clung to the wire fence that trembled under the assault of the storm. Every few seconds, gusts of wind pushed so hard that he could feel the metal cutting into his palms through his gloves. The German Shepherd puppy dangled only inches from the drop. Its back paws scraped frantically against the slick edge, sending powdery snow cascading toward the dark, shifting river below. The mother dog pressed against Logan's leg. Her fur bristled, her ears pinned back, barking hoarsely through the blizzard. Her body was trembling, whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. "Hold on!" Logan shouted, though the wind stole most of his words. The sound of cracking ice mixed with the storm's roar. He pressed his shoulder against the fence, trying to bend it outward, his muscles screaming in protest. The metal refused to yield, rigid and frozen solid. He bit down, frustration flooding through him, and slammed his fist against the wire. "Come on, damn it," he growled. His voice echoed faintly across the river, swallowed by the snow. He pulled out the small folding knife again, its dull edge glinting weakly in the gray light. He started sawing at the fence, his movements fast, desperate. The blade slipped once, slicing into his glove and nicking the skin beneath. A sharp sting, a line of blood, but he didn't stop. The puppy's body jerked each time he pressed the wire, its frightened whimpers fading into the wind. The mother dog moved closer, standing nearly chest to chest with Logan now. Her amber eyes were locked on her pup, her tail low, her breathing ragged. At one point, she nudged his arm with her nose, as if to urge him on. The simple gesture struck something deep inside him, that wordless trust, that belief that he could make things right. "Almost there," he muttered. The metal resisted, ice clinging to every groove. He pressed harder, twisting the knife until finally the wire snapped, a sharp metallic ping echoing through the storm. The puppy fell forward, yelping, and Logan caught it with both hands before it could hit the ground. He cradled it to his chest, feeling the faint vibration of its heartbeat against the cold fabric of his jacket. "There you go, little guy," he said softly, voice trembling from exertion. The mother barked once, not frantic this time, but thankful. She sniffed the pup all over, whining in relief. Logan smiled, breathless, wiping snow from his lashes. He was about to stand when the ground beneath him groaned, a deep, echoing sound like something massive shifting under the earth. The ice. Logan's eyes darted toward the river. Cracks were spreading rapidly across the frozen surface, crawling toward the bank in jagged lines. He could see the black water beneath, swirling hungrily. The vibration ran through his boots, up his legs, into his bones. "Move," he barked. He tucked the puppy under his coat and turned uphill. The mother followed, but the snow had grown deep, nearly up to his knees. Each step was a fight against the wind and gravity. He felt the slope giving way beneath the weight of the storm. The puppy whimpered softly inside his jacket, its warmth against his chest, the only thing reminding him what he was fighting for. He glanced back. The fence now leaned forward, half torn from the ground, its posts creaking as if about to collapse. "Not much time," he said under his breath. The mother dog stumbled, slipping on a patch of ice, and Logan spun around, grabbing her by the scruff and hauling her upright. "Come on, you're not quitting on me now," he shouted. She blinked snow from her eyes, shook once, and pressed close to his leg, letting him guide her up the hill. By the time they reached the top, the wind was nearly blinding. Logan dropped to one knee, panting. His hands were numb, his fingers stiff around the small bundle inside his coat. He unzipped it just enough to check. The puppy's eyes were half closed, its breathing shallow but steady. Its small tongue pressed weakly against his glove, a fragile gesture, but enough to melt the ice in his chest. Then it came again, that low, heavy crack from behind, louder this time. Logan turned his head. The riverbank split open. A large section of ice detached and slid into the water with a thunderous crash. Snow exploded upward in a misty plume. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder, and the air filled with the sharp smell of broken ice and river spray. Logan felt it vibrate through the soles of his boots. The mother dog barked, pressing against him as though to push him further back. The fence gave one last metallic groan before a corner post collapsed entirely, plunging into the river. For a few seconds, Logan stood frozen. Every instinct from years in combat screamed the same command: move. His body reacted before his mind caught up. He grabbed the mother by her collar, turned, and sprinted toward the road. The world blurred around him. Gray, white, and roaring. Meanwhile, in the small town of Riverside Bend, the people were closing shutters and checking generators. Radios crackled with warnings. Blizzard expected to reach peak intensity before midnight. Avoid all travel. In one quiet house on the edge of town, Evelyn Carter stood by her window, the faint yellow light of her lamp touching the silver in her hair. She was a small, gentle woman, her back slightly bent with age, her blue eyes soft but sharp with memory. She had seen too many winters like this. She pressed her hand to the glass, feeling the vibration of the wind outside. "This storm's got a bad heart," she whispered. She turned toward the table, where an old black and white photograph sat in a wooden frame, a young boy of about 10, laughing beside a woman holding a pie. She smiled faintly. "You always did like to run into trouble, Logan Parker," she murmured, recognizing the same stubborn spirit she had known decades ago. Her radio hissed, then caught a signal. "Repeat. Motorists are advised to stay off all county roads. Visibility near zero." She switched it off and bowed her head. "Lord," she said softly, "if he's out there, keep him warm." Back on the riverbank, the snow came in sheets now. Logan's legs burned with effort as he reached the SUV. His pulse thundered in his ears, each breath a blade in his chest. He yanked open the door and ushered the mother dog inside, then climbed in after her, still clutching the trembling puppy. For a moment, the wind screamed outside while the inside of the vehicle fell into silence. Only the rasp of his breathing and the small whine from the puppy broke it. He leaned his head against the steering wheel, eyes closed. "You two just couldn't pick an easier day, could you?" he muttered, half laughing, half exhausted. The mother licked his arm, as if answering. Then it happened. A single, deep, echoing sound beneath the earth. Crack. It came from outside, from the river. The kind of sound that meant nature had made up its mind. Logan's eyes flew open. He knew that sound. The final warning before everything gave way. He looked through the windshield, where snow swirled like smoke. Somewhere down there, the frozen river was breaking apart completely. He only had a few seconds. The air was splitting apart with the sound of the storm. Wind roared down the valley like a living beast, hurling snow in thick, stinging sheets that blurred the horizon. Logan Parker could barely see 5 feet ahead, his breath coming in white bursts as he fought against the elements. His muscles screamed in protest, his gloved hands gripping the cold iron fence that held the small German Shepherd pup hostage. The wire was frozen solid, crusted in ice, unyielding even to the strength of a man who'd once pulled his brothers out of burning vehicles under gunfire. "Hold on!" he shouted through gritted teeth. His voice was drowned by the storm. Beneath him, the river moaned, a hollow, bone-deep sound as cracks spread through its surface. The puppy's body jerked weakly with every gust, the last of its strength fading. Its fur, black and tan, was soaked through, and its eyes, wide, frightened, and glassy, met his for a single pleading heartbeat. The mother German Shepherd pressed so close against him that he could feel her ribs heaving, her ears flattened against her skull, her tail tucked tight under her. She was whimpering between barks, the sound raw and urgent. Logan could sense her trembling, not from fear of him, but from terror of losing her child. He shoved his shoulder against the fence, trying again to bend the metal. Nothing. The wire bit into his forearm as he pushed harder. His breath came fast, every exhale a grunt of pain. The storm howled louder. "Come on," he muttered, teeth clenched. His arms shook from the strain. Then, with one final surge of strength, the frozen metal gave way. A sharp crack rang out as the fence bent just enough to create a narrow opening. "Got you," Logan said, his voice hoarse. He reached through the gap, his fingers brushing the icy fur of the puppy. It whimpered weakly, too cold even to fight. Carefully, he lifted it free, mindful of its injured leg. The mother barked sharply, stepping forward, but stopped when Logan cradled the pup to his chest and tucked it inside his jacket. The small body was shockingly cold, no warmth left in it. Logan could barely feel a heartbeat beneath his palm. He pressed the pup tighter against his chest, pulling his jacket closed. "You're all right," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince the pup or himself. The puppy's faint breath warmed the fabric just beneath his chin, and something inside him softened. He looked down at the mother. Snow clung to her fur in patches, and frost gathered around her whiskers. Her amber eyes glowed faintly in the gray storm, locked on him, waiting. Logan nodded. "Let's get out of here." They started up the slope together. The wind was merciless, cutting sideways, forcing him to lower his head. Each step sent spikes of pain up his legs as his muscles protested the climb. The mother dog stayed close, sometimes brushing against his thigh, sometimes falling behind to glance back at the fence where her pup had been trapped. As they reached the road, Logan's SUV loomed ahead, half buried in snow, headlights glowing faintly through the swirling white. He yanked the door open and motioned to the mother. "Get in!" he barked over the wind. She hesitated, her instincts warring between fear and trust. Logan reached down, extended a hand, and said softly, "Come on, girl. He needs you." That was all it took. She leapt into the back seat, curling immediately beside Logan's coat as he laid the small pup down. The moment she touched her puppy, she whined low and began licking its face, her tongue moving frantically as if trying to restart its heart. Logan watched silently, chest heaving, the breath burning his throat. For a moment, he thought of his own hands, how they had once carried the weight of a soldier dying in his arms, and how helpless he had felt then. Now, for the first time in years, those same hands had delivered life instead of loss. He ran the heater full blast, leaning back against the seat, snow dripping from his hair and beard. The inside of the SUV filled with fog from their combined breath. He placed one hand on the pup under the blanket, feeling the faint, rhythmic tremor of its breathing. Still alive. The mother dog looked up at him, eyes softening. She was older than he first thought, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with a faint scar running from her shoulder to her ribs, a reminder of something brutal she must have survived. Her coat was patchy in spots, signs of hunger or neglect, but her spirit was fierce. She shifted, resting her chin gently on his knee. Logan let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah," he murmured. We both had better days. Miles away, in the small town of Riverside Bend, Evelyn Carter sat in her kitchen, the light of a flickering fireplace dancing across her lined face. She was knitting, though her hands trembled too much to make progress. Her house was warm but lonely. A portrait of her husband, Richard Carter, hung above the mantel. He had been a U.S. Marine, tall, broad-shouldered, with kind brown eyes and a smile that could calm any storm. He'd died 30 years earlier in a training accident, leaving her to raise their children alone. She sighed softly, putting down her needles. The wind rattled the window panes. She whispered, "You'd laugh at me, wouldn't you, Richard? Still talking to the wind after all these years?" She poured herself a cup of tea, the scent of chamomile and honey filling the room, and turned on her old radio for company. The announcer's voice was faint through the static. Blizzard warnings remain in effect for all of Carbon County. Temperatures expected to drop below zero by nightfall. Evelyn frowned. "Someone's out there tonight," she murmured. "Lord, send them strength." Back in the SUV, Logan rubbed his hands together, trying to chase the numbness away. He looked at the small figures beside him, the mother still licking her pup, the pup's faint chest rising and falling under the blanket. Something deep in him shifted, a warmth that had nothing to do with the heater. He had never been a father. The thought used to sting, a reminder of all the things he'd sacrificed for duty. But watching the mother dog's devotion stirred something buried in him, something that felt both painful and healing. He reached over, brushed snow from the pup's fur, and whispered, "You've got her spirit, kid. You'll make it." Outside, the wind began to change pitch, rising higher, like the howl of something distant and wild. Logan turned toward the sound, his instincts flaring again. The blizzard was closing in fast. He could feel it in the pressure of the air, the way the snow now fell heavier, faster. The mother dog barked softly, uneasy. Logan's gaze drifted to the side mirror, nothing but a wall of white. He tightened his jaw, put the SUV into gear, and said quietly, "We're not staying here." The tires spun once before finding traction. The vehicle jerked forward, cutting through the storm. He drove slowly, the headlights carving narrow tunnels of visibility through the chaos. In the back seat, the mother and pup huddled together, a fragile pocket of warmth in a world gone cold. As the storm howled outside, Evelyn added another log to her fire, whispering, "Protect them, Lord, whoever they are." Back on the road, Logan risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The mother lifted her head, met his eyes, and gave a soft whine, her tongue brushing the pup's face one last time before she settled back down. Logan exhaled, muscles relaxing. For the first time since the war, he felt something close to peace, brief, flickering, but real. Then as thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, he whispered, "Hang on, girl. The worst is still coming." And the storm swallowed their tracks as they disappeared into the white. The night had turned the color of iron. Snow came down in thick waves now, each flake carried by a merciless wind that howled through the valley like a beast freed from its cage. Logan Parker could barely see more than a few yards ahead, just a blur of white, and the faint glow of his SUV's headlights struggling against the storm. The air bit through his clothes. Every breath burned his lungs like ice. His boots sank deep into the drifts as he stumbled forward, one arm cradling the small German Shepherd puppy inside his coat, the other reaching out into the storm to guide the mother dog beside him. "Stay close, girl," he shouted over the wind, His voice vanished instantly, swallowed by the roaring white void. The mother dog, fur-coated with frost, pressed against his thigh as she ran. Her body moved low and steady, every muscle taut, ears flattened to block the wind. She didn't bark anymore. The storm had stolen her voice, but not her will. Logan's pulse pounded in his ears. His legs burned from the climb back up the slope, but he didn't dare stop. The puppy against his chest was frighteningly still, only a faint tremor showing that it was still alive. "Come on, little guy," he whispered, his voice rough. "Hang in there. We're almost there." He wasn't sure if he was reassuring the dog or himself. The SUV was half buried now, snow piling up around the tires, the windshield covered in white frost. Logan could barely recognize its outline in the storm. He quickened his pace, his boots crunching against the crusted snow. Behind him, the wind screamed over the open river like something alive. The ice was breaking apart piece by piece, each crack echoing through the storm like distant thunder. He slipped once, catching himself on the edge of the fence post, his gloved hand scraping metal. He could feel the sting even through the numbness. The mother dog yelped softly and nudged his arm with her nose, urging him to keep moving. "I'm fine," he muttered, half to her, half to the wind. When they reached the SUV, Logan yanked the passenger door open, its hinges creaking with frozen resistance. He gestured for the mother dog. "In! Go!" She hesitated just long enough to check on her pup before leaping into the back seat. Logan climbed in right after her, kicking the door shut against the howling gusts. For a moment, the silence inside the vehicle was deafening. Only the sound of his heavy breathing and the faint whine of the wind outside filled the space. He opened his coat. The puppy stirred weakly, blinking through half-frozen lashes. Its breath came in shallow puffs. Logan rubbed it gently, trying to coax warmth into its tiny body. "You're tougher than you look," he murmured. The mother dog climbed closer, pressing her body against her pup to share her warmth. Logan turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. Relief washed over him. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but the interior of the SUV began to warm. The windshield wipers scraped against the frozen glass, smearing snow instead of clearing it. He switched on the defroster and sat for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. His reflection in the side mirror startled him. A gaunt face, eyes shadowed and hollow, lips cracked from the cold. He barely recognized himself. "Still here," he whispered, his voice almost lost to the storm's drumbeat against the metal frame. He reached for his glove compartment, fumbling for a thermos he'd filled earlier that day. The lid creaked open. Steam drifted up faintly from what was left of the coffee, cold but still drinkable. He took a small sip, grimacing at the bitterness, then poured a few drops into his palm and held it near the puppy's mouth. "Drink up, soldier," he said softly. The pup licked weakly, eyes closing as if soothed by the warmth. The mother dog watched, her head tilted, ears twitching every time the wind howled. Then a flash of light caught Logan's eye, a faint golden flicker in the distance. He leaned forward, squinting through the swirling snow. It wasn't lightning. It was steady, glowing, human. A house, maybe a mile away. "There," he said. "We're not freezing out here." He shifted the SUV into gear, tires spinning before catching traction. The vehicle lurched forward. The headlights cut narrow tunnels of visibility through the storm. The snow on the road was thick and uneven, but Logan kept a steady pace. His training had taught him how to stay calm under pressure, how to control panic when everything around him fell apart. Tonight, those instincts returned in full force. He glanced at the puppy again. It was breathing steadily now, its head resting against the mother's paw. "You're gonna make it," he said, tightening his grip on the steering wheel. "Both of you." Miles away, in the small town of Riverside Bend, Evelyn Carter stood at her kitchen window, staring out into the storm. The snow had piled nearly to the top of her fence posts. The street beyond her house was empty. Not a single car or person brave enough to move through the blizzard. The glass of the window fogged with her breath as she whispered, "Mercy. This one's a mean storm." Evelyn was dressed in a thick gray cardigan and wool slippers, her silver hair tied in a bun at the nape of her neck. Her blue eyes, soft and tired, held the kind of patience that only decades of winters could teach. She shuffled to the stove, where a pot simmered quietly. She stirred it with slow, deliberate movements, the scent of chicken broth and thyme filling the room. "Hot soup keeps the soul alive," she said aloud, echoing words her husband had once told her. She glanced toward the old wooden cross hanging above her kitchen door. "I don't know who's out there tonight," she murmured, "but if you're listening, send them my way if they need warmth." The blizzard howled louder, rattling the windows. Evelyn looked out again. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow far off on the road, headlights cutting faintly through the snow. But then the wind shifted, and it was gone. "Maybe my eyes are playing tricks," she whispered, smiling sadly. Still, she left the porch light on. Back on the road, Logan tightened his jaw as the SUV rocked from a gust of wind. "Stay with me," he said to the car, as if it were an old friend. The engine growled, snow spraying from the tires as he pressed forward. The golden light ahead grew brighter, flickering through the veil of snowflakes. Inside the car, the mother dog lifted her head, tail thumping weakly against the seat. She seemed to sense what he saw. Hope. When the road finally curved, Logan saw it clearly. A small farmhouse at the edge of a pine grove, its windows glowing like lanterns. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney. "We made it," he whispered, relief catching in his throat. He pressed the gas gently, steering the SUV toward the faint gravel driveway leading to the house. The blizzard screamed behind him, but he no longer cared. For the first time all night, there was direction. Something solid, something human, waiting at the end of the road. He glanced back at the mother and her pup one more time, their bodies pressed together in the faint warmth of the car. "Hold on," he murmured. "You're about to get warm." And as the house drew closer, the wind roared like it was chasing them, furious to lose its prey. Logan gripped the wheel tighter, his eyes fixed on the glowing windows ahead, his only compass in the white darkness. By the time Logan reached the edge of town, dawn was still nowhere to be seen. The storm had softened, but the snow continued to fall in slow, heavy sheets, blanketing the streets of Riverside Bend in a pale silence. Street lights flickered through the haze, their halos faint and golden. The SUV's tires crunched over the fresh snow as he turned down Main Street, the kind of place that looked like time had forgotten it. The storefronts were dark, save for one glowing sign at the corner. Riverside Veterinary Clinic, Dr. Harper Lane. Logan pulled up in front of the small building, his headlights washing over its wooden porch and old red door. The windows were fogged from the inside, but a soft amber light glowed through them. He exhaled a long breath, relief mixing with exhaustion. "Hang in there, kid," he whispered to the puppy resting in his jacket. The small creature stirred faintly, its fur still damp, its breath slow but steady. Beside him, the mother dog sat upright, alert but trembling, her ears twitching at every sound. He stepped out of the car, boots sinking into the snow. The wind was calmer here, broken by the rows of brick buildings. Logan carried the puppy in his arms, holding it close for warmth, and motioned for the mother to follow. She hesitated at first, but quickly trotted after him, paws leaving neat prints on the frosted ground. When he pushed the clinic door open, a bell above it jingled softly, the sound startling in its simplicity. Inside, the warmth hit him instantly. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, coffee, and cedar shavings. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 30s, bundled in a thick flannel shirt under a white lab coat. Her auburn hair was tied loosely at the back, a few strands framing a tired but kind face. Her name tag read, Dr. Harper Lane. She looked up from her clipboard, and her eyes, a deep hazel flecked with green, widened at the sight before her. "My God," she breathed, setting the papers aside. "What happened?" Logan stepped forward, his voice low. "Found them by the river. The little one got stuck in a fence. The mom wouldn't leave." Dr. Lane moved quickly around the counter, her footsteps light but deliberate. "Put him here," she said, motioning to a steel examination table. She grabbed a thick towel from a nearby shelf and laid it out. Logan placed the pup down carefully. The puppy whimpered weakly, curling into the warmth of the towel. The mother dog immediately pressed her nose against the pup's neck, letting out a low sound that was part growl, part cry. Harper crouched beside the table, running her hands gently over the puppy's fur. Her fingers were steady, practiced. "Hypothermic," she murmured, "but you got to him in time. Small cut on the leg. We'll clean it up." Logan nodded silently, watching as she worked. The mother stood close enough that her breath fogged the edge of the metal table, her eyes never leaving her pup. After a moment, Harper looked up at him. "You're Parker, right?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "Logan Parker, Navy SEAL. You were in the Gazette a few years back. The article about the rescue mission overseas." She offered a faint smile. "My dad used to talk about you, said the whole town was proud." Logan's jaw tightened slightly, and his eyes dropped to the floor. That was a long time ago. Harper seemed to understand the tone. She said nothing more, only focused on wrapping the puppy's paw in gauze. When she finished, she placed a small heating pad under the towel. "He's lucky," she said softly. "And so's she. Most people would have driven right past." Logan shrugged, though his voice was quiet. "Couldn't?" "Yeah," she said after a pause, looking at him again. "Didn't think you would." A bell rang faintly from the hallway, and another figure appeared. An older man in a heavy green parka, holding a mug of coffee. He had a round face, white stubble, and bright eyes that seemed to have seen more laughter than sadness. "Doc," he said, his voice carrying the slow, melodic drawl of someone who'd lived in Wyoming his whole life. "Heard the storm nearly froze the bridge. You want me to check the generator before the power—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the dogs. "Well, I'll be. What happened here?" "Rescue case," Harper said, straightening up. "Sam, can you grab some warm blankets from the dryer?" "On it," the man said. He moved with surprising agility for his age, disappearing into the back room. His name was Sam Holloway, the clinic's handyman and unofficial guardian of all strays. He'd lived alone for years after losing his wife, but kept himself busy fixing fences, shoveling snow, and helping Harper at the clinic. Harper washed her hands at the sink, then turned back to Logan. "You should sit. You look half frozen yourself." "I'm fine," he said, though his voice betrayed fatigue. His face was pale, and frost still clung to his beard. "Suit yourself," she said, crossing her arms, "but you're not leaving until you've had something hot." She nodded toward the small coffee machine in the corner. "There's fresh brew." He hesitated, but eventually poured himself a cup. The bitter smell filled the room, grounding him. Through the window, the storm still raged, though the light from the clinic made the outside world seem distant, unreal. Harper approached the mother dog and crouched beside her. "You're a brave one," she murmured, rubbing her neck gently. The dog's fur was rough, tangled, and speckled with ice, but under Harper's touch, she began to relax. "What should I call her?" she asked without looking up. Logan thought for a moment. "She's earned something strong," he said. "Call her Grace." Harper smiled faintly. "Grace it is." She looked at the puppy. "And this little one?" Logan glanced down at the small bundle of fur breathing under the towel. "River," he said quietly. "Seems right." Harper nodded, as if the names had weight beyond words. "Grace and River," she repeated softly. Sam returned with a pile of warm blankets, placing them on a nearby chair. "Doc, generator's fine. Power's steady for now." "Good," Harper said, looking at Logan. "They'll need to stay here overnight, but they'll be okay. The pup just needs warmth and rest." Logan nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing. That's all I needed to hear. The mother dog, Grace, raised her head and gently licked the puppy's ear. River stirred, a faint sound escaping him, something between a sigh and a whimper. Logan watched them for a long time, feeling the strange quiet that only comes after chaos. Outside, the snow began to ease, the wind losing its edge. The first hints of dawn colored the horizon in muted pinks and golds. Inside the small clinic, the air was still and warm, the hum of the heater blending with the rhythmic breathing of two rescued souls. Harper placed a gentle hand on Logan's arm. "He'll be fine," she said softly. "Give it a couple of days." For the first time that night, Logan smiled, small but real. "Thank you, Doc." She shrugged, smiling back. "You're the one who saved them." But Logan knew better. In that moment, with Grace nuzzling her pup and the storm fading beyond the window, it felt like they had all saved each other. The snow had finally stopped. Morning light poured through the frosted windows of the Riverside Veterinary Clinic, casting a soft golden glow across the room. The world outside lay quiet and white, wrapped in a heavy stillness that came only after a storm had spent its fury. Inside, the hum of the small heater filled the silence, and the air smelled faintly of coffee, pine, and antiseptic. Logan Parker sat near the corner of the room, his elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the two German shepherds, curled together on a blanket near the heater. The larger one, the mother, was asleep, her body curled protectively around the smaller pup. The faint rise and fall of her chest was steady now, peaceful. The little one occasionally twitched in his sleep, letting out a soft yip. Logan smiled faintly. He hadn't smiled like that in years, not the kind that reached his eyes. Dr. Harper Lane walked in, her lab coat draped loosely over her shoulders, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You didn't move all night," she said gently, setting 1 cup beside him. "You should get some rest before you head out." He looked up at her, his voice rough from exhaustion. Didn't want to leave them alone. Harper smiled, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You don't have to worry. They're both doing great. The little one's strong. Stubborn too. Reminds me of someone else I know. Logan let out a quiet chuckle, though his gaze never left the dogs. I don't even know what I'm doing here, Doc. I came through this town by accident. Funny thing about accidents, she said, leaning against the counter. Sometimes they're just detours on the road you were supposed to take. Her words lingered in the warm air. Logan looked down again. I haven't cared about anything for a long time. Not since I got back. Harper's voice softened. You don't have to explain. She'd seen that look before. Men who carried invisible wounds. The kind that never healed right. What's next for you? He shrugged. Don't know. I was just going to keep driving until the road stopped. He looked at the two dogs, but I guess the road stopped here. At that, Harper smiled. Maybe it's not the end. Maybe it's a beginning. Before he could answer, the front door creaked open, and a gust of cold air swept in. Evelyn Carter stepped inside, bundled in her thick brown coat, a knitted scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. Her silver hair peeked from beneath a wool hat, and her cheeks were pink from the cold. She carried a small thermos and a wicker basket that smelled faintly of soup and fresh bread. Morning, Harper, she said warmly. Thought I'd bring something hot for whoever spent the night here. Her blue eyes found Logan, and she smiled. Guess that's you? Logan rose to his feet, surprised. Mrs. Carter? You still remember an old lady like me, she said with a soft laugh, setting the basket down on the counter. It's been a long time since your mother used to leave you with me when she worked double shifts. You were a handful even then. He chuckled quietly, rubbing the back of his neck. You still make that chicken soup? Made it this morning, she said, unscrewing the thermos. Storm or no storm, a body needs something warm. She poured him a cup, the steam curling through the air. Heard from Harper you saved 2 lives last night. Logan hesitated, glancing at the dogs. They saved me first, he said finally. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, her eyes gentle but knowing. You know, Logan, she said softly, the Lord has a strange way of sending us what we need. Sometimes it comes wearing fur. He smiled faintly, his throat tight. You really think so? She stepped closer, laying a hand on his arm. Her touch was light but full of warmth. I know so, she said. God always sends us what we need, but he hides it under the snow, so we have to dig for it. For a while, none of them spoke. The morning sunlight touched the 2 sleeping dogs, turning their fur to shades of gold and bronze. The smaller one stirred, letting out a soft squeak. Logan crouched down, holding out his hand. The pup blinked up at him, its little black nose twitching before pressing against his palm. The mother opened her eyes and raised her head, watching him carefully, but there was no fear in her gaze anymore, only trust. Logan looked over his shoulder at Harper. You think they'd do all right with me? Harper folded her arms, a slow smile forming. You mean if you took them home? He nodded. Yeah, if I can call it that. I think they've already decided, Harper said, nodding toward the mother, who had crawled closer, resting her muzzle against Logan's boot. Evelyn chuckled softly. Looks like you've been adopted, soldier. Logan reached down and scratched the mother's neck gently. Then I guess I should give them names. Harper tilted her head. Got something in mind? He thought for a long moment, staring at the two of them. "The mother," he said slowly. "I'll call her Hope, because she never gave up." He smiled faintly. "And the pup, Scout, because somehow he led her back to me." Evelyn's eyes shimmered. "Hope and Scout," she repeated softly. "Beautiful names." Harper nodded approvingly. "You've got good instincts, Logan. Maybe those aren't the only two souls you're rescuing." He glanced at her with a faint smile. "Maybe not." Sam Holloway entered just then, stomping snow from his boots. "Looks like the roads are clearing," he announced cheerfully. "Sun's finally showing itself. I'd say you picked the right day to stick around, mister." "Guess I did," Logan replied. He helped Harper pack a small supply kit, antibiotics, bandages, and a few tins of food. Harper handed it to him with a teasing smile. "You take care of them, or I'll send Sam after you." Sam grinned. "And I charge for gas." Logan laughed for the first time that day. A real laugh, deep and unguarded. He looked down at Hope, who now stood beside him, tail wagging softly, and Scout, who tried clumsily to climb his boot before collapsing in a heap. "All right, team," he said quietly. "Let's go home." Evelyn stepped forward, touching his shoulder once more. "Remember, Logan, sometimes home isn't a place. It's the ones who find you when you've lost your way." He met her gaze, his eyes soft. "Thank you," he said simply. When Logan stepped outside, the air was crisp and bright. The snow sparkled under the pale winter sun, and for the first time in years, the world didn't feel so heavy. Hope walked beside him, steady and proud, while Scout trotted close to his heel, his tiny paw prints weaving through the fresh snow. He paused before getting into the truck, taking one last look at the small town, at the clinic window where Harper waved, and at Evelyn standing by the porch light, her scarf fluttering in the wind. He nodded once, as if promising to come back. Then he opened the truck door, letting the two dogs climb in, and drove toward the open road. Not to escape this time, but to begin again. Inside the cab, Hope rested her head on his leg, while Scout, exhausted from the morning, curled up in his lap. Logan reached down, running his hand gently through their fur. The warmth of their bodies seeped through his palms, melting the last of the cold still clinging to him. For the first time in a long time, Logan Parker didn't feel alone. A week had passed since the storm. The snow along the valley had softened, turning from cruel white walls into gentle mounds of light. The river no longer groaned beneath its icy weight. It whispered now, trickling between cracks that glittered under the pale winter sun. Logan Parker stood at the edge of that same riverbank, his boots sinking slightly into the slush, breath curling in faint mist. Behind him, two sets of paw prints followed, one large, steady, and confident, the other small and uneven, weaving clumsily between the steps. Hope trotted to his side, her black and tan coat catching the morning light, while Scout, the smaller pup, darted forward through the snow with a clumsy joy only youth could muster. Every few steps, the pup looked back at him, as if to make sure he was still there. Logan couldn't help but smile. He had thought he'd forgotten how. The wind was calm now, soft enough to carry the faint rustle of pines from the ridge beyond. The same fence still stood at the edge of the frozen river, twisted and bent where he had ripped it apart that night. The sight brought a strange tightness to his chest. Not pain exactly, but the memory of a moment when everything had changed. He ran his gloved fingers over the metal, tracing the marks where the wire had split under his grip. "Right here," he murmured. "This is where it happened." Hope approached, sniffing the spot carefully, her ears twitching. Scout came bounding after her, tumbling into a pile of snow before popping back up, tail wagging furiously. Logan laughed softly. "You remember, don't you?" he said to Hope. "This is where you called for help." The German Shepherd lifted her head, amber eyes reflecting the sunlight. She gave a low, content bark and pressed her muzzle against his leg. Logan crouched, resting one hand on her neck, feeling the warmth of her pulse beneath the thick fur. "You did good," he whispered. "You saved him. You saved me too." For a long time, he stayed there, not moving, just breathing in the stillness. The world around him was quiet, except for the rhythmic sound of the river melting and the crunch of Scout's paws as he explored the edge of the bank. The sky above was a soft silver, clouds drifting lazily apart, revealing pale blue patches. Logan looked up, his gaze following the slow dance of snowflakes that still fell, not from the sky, but from the branches shaking off their burden. He remembered the endless noise of that storm, the biting cold, the blinding white that had made the world feel like a battlefield again. But here, under this new light, it was hard to believe it had ever been so violent. Footsteps crunched softly behind him. Logan turned and saw Evelyn Carter approaching along the trail, wrapped in her brown coat and wool scarf, her silver hair catching the sunlight. She walked carefully, each step deliberate, the basket she carried swaying slightly at her side. "You found the place," she said when she reached him, her voice calm and warm. He nodded. "Couldn't stay away." Evelyn smiled. "Didn't think you would." She stopped beside him, looking out over the river. "You know, it looks different in daylight. Quieter, kinder." "It does," Logan said softly. "Hard to believe it's the same river." "Storms can do that," she said. "They show you how fragile everything really is. Then when they pass, you start seeing what's worth keeping." She set her basket down and pulled out a small thermos. "Brought you coffee. Figured you'd need it." He took it with a grateful nod. "You read my mind," she chuckled. "A skill that comes with age." She watched as Scout chased his own tail in circles near the trees. "He's growing fast." "Yeah," Logan said, watching the pup tumble into the snow again. "He's trouble already." "Trouble's good for the soul," Evelyn said with a faint grin. "Keeps you moving." Logan sipped the coffee. It was warm, strong, and a little too sweet. Exactly how he liked it. "You know," he said after a pause, "I used to think I was done. After I got back, I didn't think I had anything left worth saving." Evelyn turned to him, her blue eyes soft but steady. "And now?" He looked toward Hope, who stood guard a few yards away, and Scout, who had found a stick twice his size and was proudly dragging it across the snow. "Now," he said, "I think I was wrong." She nodded slowly, her breath visible in the cold air. "The Lord's funny that way. He doesn't send us what we want, just what we need. Sometimes he wraps it in fur and puts it on four legs." Logan smiled, his gaze distant. "Guess I'll stop questioning his methods." Evelyn laughed quietly. "You do that." She tucked her hands into her pockets and watched as Scout finally dropped the stick and flopped onto his back, rolling in the snow with reckless joy. "You're good with them," she said. "You've got that kind of patience only soldiers or shepherds have." "Never thought I'd be either," he said. "Oh, you were always both," she replied. "You just forgot for a while." For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full, of gratitude, of peace, of everything the storm had taken, but somehow returned in a different form. Evelyn finally placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Logan," she said softly. "You found your way back." He turned to her, his voice quiet but sure. "We all did." A light breeze swept across the valley, carrying the faint sound of melting water and distant birdsong. Hope barked once, sharp and playful, and Scout perked up instantly, bounding toward her. Logan crouched down, running his hand along Hope's back, and then scooping Scout into his arms. The little pup wriggled, tail wagging wildly. "You two ready for another adventure?" Logan asked. Hope tilted her head, ears flicking forward as if to say always. Evelyn smiled from behind them, her eyes glistening with something tender and eternal. To her, the sight of the three of them standing there, man, mother, and child, was something close to divine. A small miracle born not from luck, but from love, stubbornness, and the strange mercy of winter. Logan looked out at the river one last time. The water shimmered under the morning sun, pieces of ice drifting away like forgotten ghosts. He whispered, almost to himself, "That day, we saved each other." The clouds broke apart, and light spilled across the snow, warm and soft. The air felt alive again. Hope trotted ahead, Scout bounding after her, their laughter of barks echoing through the stillness. Logan followed, his boots crunching on the snow, the weight in his chest finally gone. Behind them, Evelyn watched until they disappeared into the light. She clasped her hands together, breathed in deeply, and whispered, "Thank you." And as the wind carried the last of the snowflakes away, the valley shone, not with cold, but with the quiet warmth of beginnings. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or light. They come quietly, wrapped in fur, carried by the cold wind, finding those who have forgotten how to hope. What happened on that frozen river wasn't just a rescue. It was a reminder that God still works in small, gentle ways. He sends us love disguised as need, second chances hidden beneath the snow, and reminders that even the broken can be chosen to heal others. In our everyday lives, we pass by people, and sometimes animals, who are crying out for help in silence. Maybe today, you can be the one who stops, who listens, who reaches out. And maybe, through that act of kindness, you'll find that God has been reaching back all along. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a little light this winter. Leave a comment below with where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories that remind us that faith, hope, and love are never truly lost. May God bless you and everyone you hold dear.